Good evening. I want to first say I'm so happy to be here at the Colombo Leadership Academy's initiative, and this is the second time I have actually come. And the work they are doing, the encouragement they are to particularly to the corporate sector in this country. I was also very happy to note that they are thinking beyond our shores and have ventured into North America and into Canada with the strategic Canadian partners. I noticed that they were doing 360-degree leadership profiling assessment. I remember going through one of those myself at the Side Business School at Oxford, several years ago. And I want to just wish the Colombo Leadership Academy the best. I want to congratulate Chanaka and Vatsala on the outstanding performance and that you have been entered into the Hall of Fame. I quickly looked at the magazine which was on my table to see if there were any women in the Hall of Fame. And I hope I'm not wrong. I think so far there are only males in the Hall of Fame. Now, I'm not surprised by it, because when I was CEO of a company, they had done a survey of about 100 companies, and there were only about 2 CEOs, I think, at that time. Now, I hope that has improved, because that was 12 years ago. And to see more women in leadership. I want to just emphasize that point because Sri Lanka has 52% women, and after 75 years of independence, we still only have 5% of women in parliament. If you look at our O-levels, if you look at our A-levels, if you look at our universities in this country, with the exception of a few departments, right? Women basically lead there as well. And more recently, I have become aware that if you look at professionals, right, whether they are doctors or lawyers or other professionals, that women actually again seem to be leading in those areas. So in the corporate sector, I certainly will say, when it comes to the boards, when it comes to senior management, I think we need to be very conscious of the big contribution that these women can make. Just now I'm going to say a few anecdotal stories rather than give you a speech and a lecture. When I was appointed CEO, I sat at the table, big office, and suddenly this thought came to me: how are you going to actually run this company? And I heard, or a thought that hit me was, Eran, take care of the people and the people will take care of the business. And I think from everything Channa said today, I'm very much in the same philosophy. It is people that are absolutely critical. I remember calling some lady who was in her mid-30s because I had this philosophy, and I had decided that she should be in the senior management. Normally what CEOs do is we look at the bottom line, we look at return on equity, and then we take all the things that contribute to it and make them direct reports. And generally human resources, we give it to somebody who is reporting to us. I changed it. I said if human resources are important, maybe the HR head should be reporting to me. So when the vacancy came, a lady in her mid-30s, I basically decided to appoint her. Some of my senior managers came to me and said, can she handle it? She is very young. And I said, I listened carefully. And I said, if it was a guy, you may have turned around and told me he's on a fast track. But how about the lady? One day I was sitting there in office, and we annually do a trip. We go take everybody in the company, build a family atmosphere, book a few hotels down by a beach. And it was the crisis in 2008 or 9, the Asian crisis. She came to see me to plan out this visit. She was sitting there. She said, I want to share something with you. Don't fall off your chair. I said, certainly I won't. Please go ahead. And I'm cutting a long story short. And she said, why don't we take everybody overseas? That thought had occurred to me about a decade earlier in a different situation. And that was just taking everybody overseas. Asian crisis, no tourists, hotels are cheap. I just decided on the countries. I just said it has to be Thailand, Singapore or Malaysia. I wanted the families going, not just the marketing teams and the senior management, all the families, with everybody. And the person who was driving my car, who worked for me the whole week, comes from a village. He took his basically family and his 2 little kids. Today I'm glad to say that he drove me here as well. He's retired from my company, but he drove me here today. And his children are doing extremely well. He told me that it transformed their lives, because it's not like watching a film. Just coming from a backward village in Sri Lanka near Ratnapura, opened their mind and transformed it from language learning to skills to education to being professionals today. And that came because that lady really believed in what she came and told me. I won't embarrass that lady. I just spotted her in the audience here today. So, I want to leave you with a few thoughts, not about your companies. It's about great manager. Sri Lanka needs great managers. And the thoughts I'm sharing with you, I'm doing it only because very few people could actually tell you what I'm going to tell you. I was told once I stepped into my new sphere of work that I was just the second CEO of a public quoted company in the 75-year history of this country. Those of us who come from corporates, there's so much invested in us. We don't realize it. And we basically move in our circles, talk in our circles. We contribute in our companies. And I want to say that's great that you are doing it. But Sri Lanka is bigger than our companies. And Sri Lanka needs great managers. We often, in our cocktail circles, we look around, we know what's wrong with the country. We know what needs to be done. But somehow or the other, there is nobody there to actually deliver or to actually make the change. Great managers are needed. When I was appointed CEO, I hired an international consultancy company as soon as I was appointed leader, and I told them to work on the succession plan after me. They said, 10 years, you have 10 years to go. We are going to choose 4 people, 2 from in the company, 2 we will bring from outside, and then as the years go by, maybe that person will emerge as a CEO. Plan B, if you are run over by a bus, who takes over immediately? Plan B worked out, and I'm happy to see Russell DeMille here, who was a senior in the bank, who actually succeeded me. I go into politics, and I quickly learn that the perspective is different. If there is a possible successor or somebody who is better than you, you destroy them. You never build a succession plan. And the reason I'm sharing these things with you is to create an awareness of the circumstances. I'm not talking here about individuals. I'm talking about systems issues, because this country is calling for systems change. That is what we actually need to change. But the whole framework is different. We talk about strategy. We need strategy. That's for sure. Your company needs it. You're the CEO. You think about strategy. You think about execution. You think about, where should my company be in a few years' time? let's all think about, where should Sri Lanka be in a few years' time? When I was born, Asia was not talked about too much. It was the United States and Europe that were seen as the great powers, even economically. But in one lifetime, that is changing. Asia is becoming the greatest economic power in the world in just one lifetime. India is emerging, and it's emerging strongly. And Sri Lanka, who was somewhere high in that ladder in Asia, has come somehow slowly to the bottom of that ladder. With Asia emerging, we have a great responsibility to make sure that this country actually emerges as Asia begins to emerge. And that's a thought that I would like to leave with you, because a huge change is happening. As you think about your company, please think about the country. We have so much that we need to do if we are to position this country. I was at a doctor's thing the other day, and the doctors were complaining to me about the brain drain that's happening. And they were saying, how can we stop this? I didn't go to criticize them. I said we need to think anew. An IT company CEO came to me and said 75 people in my company are leaving. And I asked him, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to relocate. I told him, please don't relocate. If I'm in office, I'm going to give you 75 e-visas to bring those people from anywhere you think, because that company is needed in this country. We are talking about the future of this country, and those people can come. Some people object to thinking like this. If we have the people, certainly we will give them the first place. In the following year, if he needs 100 e-visas, we'll give them the 100 e-visas. But if we have the talent, we'll reduce the 75 to 50. We need to think about how we are going to advance the interest of this country. We have to think outside our traditional ways if we are really going to advance this. We want those businesses. We want those companies here. What limits us? It's our thinking that limits us. That's what's limiting us. Our vision, our thinking, our execution limits us. I like that thing that came about Channa over and over again on the screen, that he's a humble person. He was always with his people. And everybody was talking about, he was a caring person. That just came through. Leadership, it's certainly about care. It's about purpose. It's about values. And we absolutely need this. Somebody asked me, what is your position on state-owned enterprises? Somebody was asking me, because the government is announcing that state-owned enterprises needs to be reformed and transformed. For too long in this country, we have been only thinking about the rights of people like us who actually work in companies. If I put it another way, the trade unions, and I mean trade unions in the broadest possible way, because even doctors in this country have trade unions, and trade unions are different levels. But really the thinking has to change. The customer is the most important thing. For you in the private sector, that comes as no surprise at all. But the thinking in the country is not like that. When we think about energy, when we think about food security, whatever we think about in terms of services to the public in this country, it's a customer that comes first. It's the citizen that must come first. That's what's important. Example, if you take energy, we are pricing emergency energy at 100 rupees a unit. If you do sustainable energy, it's 15 rupees a unit. We don't have the money to invest in sustainable energy. 40,000 megawatts potential in sustainable energy. Obviously, you need the capital. You need to be open to foreign investment. And when I said that, they began to object. And they said, no, you can't do that. I asked, why? You can't sell. They said, you can't sell the treasures of this country. I asked them whether it was solar and wind power, the treasures of this country. No, it is the thinking that has limited us. To bring the price down, we need to invite that to come. So sometimes we get boxed in with this whole thing that the citizen and the customer is not first. What you take for granted is not the common thought in the country. And often we get boxed in by trade unions and trade union demands. I am all for advancing and protecting the interest of the working people. I've tried very hard to demonstrate that in my professional career. But remember, even as a politician, it's the citizens that come first, and we need to look at their interests. I thought I'd just share these few things with you, just to put your word in the larger context. High integrity and value is needed. And I would like to close just with this one final thought. We are 22 million people. 3 million plus live overseas. But just last year, nearly 1 million people left this country. Nearly 1 million people. And we could be saying, oh, who is to blame for this? What can we, do? We are not to blame for this, and so forth. I am off the blame game. I am always thinking, what can we do to reverse it? What can we do to reverse it? I stepped into this new sphere to keep your children in this country because they are the greatest asset the country can have. Our generation failed, but that generation was born with the internet. They know the world. They know what's happening elsewhere. They are more globalized than my generation, and they certainly can change the destiny of this country. The Sri Lankans overseas are the biggest asset we have. For too long, we have looked at them like a liability. Education levels of Sri Lankans overseas, the technology that they have, the savings that they have, they're such a huge, huge asset. When I worked for an international bank as a young banker and I was reporting into Bombay, the non-resident Indian concept was introduced, and I watched what happened. It's taken 30 years, but India today is not the India in which I was a young banker then. It's completely transformed. If we make the right decisions now about these Sri Lankans who live overseas and see them as an asset, see them as partners, see them as investors, see them as people who can transform technology and bring technology. This country is a small country. We can change it in one generation to bring it in the Asian League to a very, very high position. That's what we need to do. The second generation of Sri Lankans living overseas are born in Canada, in the US, in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in all these other places. The second generation. Our generation, we studied here. They have connections, empathetic connections. All boys networks, all girls networks. Law college, medical college, technical college, German tech, you name it. They have some connection. But the generation born there is different. They're Canadian, they're American, they're Australian, they're European. They have studied there. They are in those companies, getting to the highest levels in those companies. They have the connections. They can bring the trade and investment into this country. And therefore, this country's problems, however dark it might look, like when today we lit that lamp, and you mentioned that, it can be changed quickly. You have, as an audience, a greater mission and a greater contribution you can make. Don't underestimate your role in Sri Lanka's future. Thank you very much.